I finally got my Boss RC600 loop station in the mail after pre-ordering it a while back. So today I'm going to compare the Boss RC600 with the TC Helicon Voicelive 3 Extreme that I've been using for some time now. We'll discuss quickly how I use a looper both with a band and solo, and how I plan to replace the Voicelive 3 Extreme with the RC600. Also walk you through the differences between the two products and give you a kind of pros and cons of each. And then we'll do a quick demo of some of the vocal effects and also some of the guitar effects. And then you'll be able to figure out which piece of gear is right for you. Welcome to Punk Rock 101. So I've used a lot of different loop stations at this point, including the Boss RC300, the TC Electronic Ditto X2 and X4, the Pigtronics Infinity, and most recently the TC Helicon Voicelive 3 Extreme with the Boss RC500. So I have a solo one-man band setup where I run my guitar into an HX Stomp, and I split the signal between a guitar amp and a bass amp with an octaver. And then I also run a Roland SPD-SX for drums, and I kind of play a little bit of everything. And with this solo setup, I use the TC Helicon Voicelive 3 Extreme for all of the looping that I do. I'll link a video of me using that setup if you're interested in checking it out. However, when I go out and tour and play shows, I actually run my guitar into the Line 6 Helix rack system, and I run it into two guitar amps and a bass amp with an octaver. And with that setup, I play with a live drummer. However, I still do a lot of live looping. But with that setup, I actually do all of my guitar looping through the Boss RC500, and then I do my vocal looping and vocal effects through the TC Helicon Voicelive 3. And without getting too crazy into it, the reason I need both of these is because the inputs and the outputs on both devices doesn't allow me to run my setup exactly how I want to. Not to mention the fact that the Boss RC500 also sounds better and is a little bit more reliable than the Voicelive when it comes to looping. But with the new Boss RC600, all that's about to change because with this loop station, it has tons of inputs and outputs, and it allows you to route them exactly how you want to. And on top of that, it has vocal effects built in, guitar amp sims and effects, which means it should be able to completely replace the Voicelive 3 altogether. Or can it? So let's talk about how each pedal operates. The RC600 is a 6-track looper, and all of the tracks can actually be used simultaneously, which is honestly pretty crazy and probably more than I need, but it's possible. So the tracks are listed out as 1 through 6, and you can start and stop them pretty easily right from the device. You have 1 through 3 here, and then when you press this track select button, it goes to 4, 5, and 6. The Voicelive 3 is a 3-track looper, but only 2 of the tracks can actually be used at the same time. The tracks are labeled inside the looper as A, B, and C, where loop A can always be accessed, while B and C have to be swapped and can't be used at the same time. So the RC600 definitely does have a win on the board here for the amount of tracks you can loop with. So let's talk a little bit about the inputs and the outputs on each device, because honestly, this is what sold me on buying the RC600. So the RC600 has a ton of inputs and outputs, and you can route them however you want to. Starting over here, you have 2 mic inputs. So if you want to use 2 microphones for whatever, whether it's your voice or you have another instrument that you want to mic up, you have 2 mic inputs right there. You also have 2 stereo instrument inputs, which can also be switched in the device to just be mono inputs. So realistically, if you wanted to plug in 4 guitars, you could. Or you could plug in 1 guitar, a bass, and a drum pad. The options are pretty limitless, but yeah, you have 4 inputs right there. You then have 3 sets of outputs, including the main outputs and then 2 sub outputs. And you can route any of these inputs to come out of whatever outputs you want. So if you want to plug a microphone and your guitar in, but you want the microphone to go out to a PA and the guitar to go out to a guitar amp, that's super easy to do. And then finally, you also have a headphones output that you can just plug a set of headphones into. And you can route anything to that headphone output that you really want to. You don't have to route all of the instruments to the headphones if you don't want to hear all of them. You then have 2 jacks for external controllers, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then a MIDI input and output and a USB input. So yeah, overall, a lot of flexibility on this thing. So the inputs and outputs on the back of the Voicelive 3 are a little bit different. You have a mic input that works as XLR or 1/4 inch, and that goes to all of the mic effects that are inside of the pedal. You then have a guitar input and a guitar through. So if you don't plan on using the guitar effects in here, you can use this through to just go out to your amplifier. You have an 1/8 inch aux input, which I've actually used for my drum pad. The only thing is that there's not a lot of flexibility on which output this comes out of, but it is there. You also have a monitor input, so if you want to use some kind of a monitoring system, you can. You then have 2 XLR outputs, 2 guitar outputs, a jack for your foot switch, a jack for an expression pedal, and then a MIDI input, a MIDI output, a place to put a USB thumb drive, and then also just a regular USB jack for your computer. My main problem with the Voicelive was that I could never plug in a microphone and a stereo guitar signal. That to me would have made this product a lot better because I do the guitar and the bass signal thing for my amps, and I just need a stereo guitar input to go into the looper. So that's why I always had to use a second looper. So in both devices, you're able to set up the looper to work how you need it to work. For example, in the Voicelive 3, you can see that there's different sync options, including serial, smart, quantize, and free. And basically these different options just tell the looper how it's going to be synced. So serial mode is letting one loop come after the other. Smart lets it kind of just figure out inside itself what the tempo is, and it keeps the loops together. Quantize keeps it quantized to a specific beat, and free just doesn't lock it to anything. While in the RC600, there's also very similar options. So if you go into the loop menu and you go into this track menu, I know it's a little tough to see with this glare, but you have options for how loud you want it to be, where you want it to be panned, if it'll follow a tempo, how it plays back, if you just want it to be free and not quantized to anything. So just like the Voicelive 3, you have those very similar options. With the RC600, you're able to do it track per track. So if you wanted track 1 to be free from the tempo, but then you wanted track 2 to follow maybe a rhythm track you have going, you can totally do that in every memory, which is really cool. It's very customizable. So yeah, both of these pedals are pretty flexible in that way. And if you wanted to play to a metronome and keep the loops really locked in with a metronome, like I do when I play with a drummer, that's totally doable in both products. And you can send that metronome signal just out to your headphones in either the Voicelive 3 or the RC600, which is honestly really cool because I used to have to use a drum pad with a MIDI cable synced to my looper just as a metronome, and it was really annoying to just carry a drum pad around just to be a metronome. One advantage that the RC600 does have, though, is that it has built-in rhythm tracks that you can play along with. So if you want to just play along to some drum beats, there's a bunch already built in, and there's more that you can actually download off of the Boss Tone Studio app, and this is not something that comes stock in the Voicelive 3. The Voicelive 3 just comes with the metronome sound. So now let's talk a little bit about backing tracks because I know a lot of people use those. Both of these devices do allow you to add backing tracks in. In the Voicelive 3 Extreme, you can upload backing tracks right with a USB drive. However, it's really important to note that if you choose to do this and you use the backing track mode, that you can't use the looper at the same time. It's either one or the other. But you can upload the file as a loop instead, but it's going to just take up either A, B, or C, one of the loop tracks that you have. With the RC600, you can upload your backing track to any of the 6 different loop tracks, and obviously it'll take up one of the tracks within that memory, but you still have 5 others to play with. Or with the Voicelive, since you can only run 2 looping tracks at the same time, the backing track's going to take up one of those, and you'll only have one other to play with simultaneously. So there's definitely another point for the RC600 there. As far as the button operations go, the Voicelive 3 is pretty straightforward. By default, when you're in the blue menu, you're just clicking on different vocal effects, and you can change them to be whatever you want per patch. And then when you click over to the red menu, you're in the guitar effects. So now this is just affecting what comes into the guitar input on the back of this. And again, you just have whatever effects you want to use for your guitar. When you hold the button, it goes into the looper, and now you're in the looper menu. And then within the looper menu, obviously you can see you start to record A, you can play it back, record B, and these little squares kind of just tell you what these buttons are going to do. And using the button map function, you can make adjustments to make these buttons do really whatever you want. So the RC600 comes stock like this, where you have tracks 1, 2, 3, and then when you press the track select button, you have 4, 5, and 6. And then you have an undo redo button and an all start stop, which just starts and stops all of the loops at the same time. And then if you hold this track select button, you can get to the effects. But also you can remap these buttons to do whatever you want. If you wanted this button to be your all start stop, you could do that. If you wanted this button to turn on one of the effects, you can do that too. Any of these buttons are programmable. And now both of these devices allow you to add external foot switches to access more buttons and be able to control a few more things. However, I think it's really important to note that if you want to use a MIDI device for control, the RC600 is much more powerful. The Voicelive doesn't let you operate the looper at all via MIDI. It only really lets you turn effects on and off. And even though you can operate certain aspects of the looper with a foot switch like this or this, which will allow you to clear the loops, stop, and play certain loops, it doesn't really let you get specific with tracks A, B, and C, like record loop B or record track A, which really means to me that if you want to do some looping with the Voicelive, you're going to need to have it in front of you or just on your pedal board in general. Where the RC600 is fully controllable via MIDI, meaning that it can live inside of a rack backstage, and if you use a MIDI system or like a Helix or something like that, you can control any aspect of the looper, which I know for some people like myself is definitely an advantage. All right, so now let's demo some of the effects in both of the units and kind of do a side-by-side comparison. I definitely like to take a look at the vocal harmonies as well as the guitar amp simulators and just a few other effects just so you guys have an idea. So in the RC600, there's two types of effects. There's the input effects and there's the track effects. And how this works basically is the input effects are whatever effects you want to put on any of the inputs, like your vocal harmonies, if you want to add a guitar amp, if you want to put a delay or a pitch shift or anything like that on your instrument. The track effects actually happen after you create the loop. So once you make a loop, you can put on effects to that loop afterwards. The TC Helicon does not have anything like the track effects. It really only has the idea of the input effects. So we're going to focus on that for today. So how this works is that you can have 4 of the input effects on at the same time, and there's 4 banks of them. So you can switch between the banks, but only 4 of the effects can be used at the same time, which is something to keep in mind. So the input effects can be used on any input. There's not like a different harmony effect for your voice specifically. So I'm just going to scroll through some of the effects, but I definitely want to take a quick look at the harmonies. Okay, this is the lo-fi vocal sound. This is what the radio sounds like. Ring mod. So here is the harmony effect on the Boss RC600. With this effect, you can have it set to auto, which kind of automatically follows your voice, but you can only have one voice on at a time. If you wanted to add more voices, say you wanted to add the higher octave and the lower octave at the same time, you would have to add on a second harmony effect, so it would take one of your 4 tracks. But here's one voice. This is the unison effect. In the TC Helicon, they call this the doubler, but let's do a higher one. This is the higher harmony. This is the higher harmony. This is the highest octave. This is the lower harmony. This is the lowest harmony. This is a lower harmony. This is the octave. So don't mind my voice. I just woke up a little while ago, but I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the harmony effect does sound like in here. There's also other effects, like you can add distortion. Here's an octave effect. And then we'll take a little quick look at the delay. So this is one of the delays. Sounds kind of cool. Here's the panning delay. If you listen to this one in stereo, it sounds crazy. A reverse. It's doing it to my voice. A mod. Tape echo. Hey, this is like a weird robot delay. All right, so let's take a look at some of the effects in the Voicelive 3. Keep in mind, as I'm doing the demos of each one of these products, I am using the product as the USB interface. So as I demo the RC600, I am using that to run my mic into the computer. Same with the Voicelive. The Voicelive definitely does have a lot of vocal effects. So let's take a look at all the harmonies. So with the RC600, when you use the harmony effect, if you wanted to add multiple voices at the same time, you'd have to use different effect blocks. With the Voicelive 3, it does have options to add 2 voices, which is just something to consider. This is the doubler effect in the Voicelive. Hey, hey. This is the lower harmony. This is the higher harmony. This is the high and low at the same time. This is the high and the high at the same time. This is the low and the low at the same time. This is the higher and the lower at the same time. This is the bass and the high at the same time. This is a gospel choir. This is another choir. Again, I apologize for my voice, but you kind of get the idea, and you can see how they follow. I will say, as a longtime user of the Voicelive 3, it does help to play guitar chords with this because it senses the guitar chords and it kind of helps keep the vocals in tune. But other than that, there's a ton of effects. You could throw on a delay or a reverb or a choir. And there's like a stutter effect that sounds like this. And then also the doubler. I will say the cool thing about the Voicelive 3 is that you can just have all of these effects running at the same time if you wanted. So I just turned on 6 vocal effects at the same time, which is pretty cool because, like I said, in the RC600, you can only run 4 effects. So let's switch over to the guitar. So I specifically with the guitar want to just look at the amp sim so you can kind of hear what the guitar amp sounds are kind of like. This is the Stack Crunch. there's a couple different things. You can change the speaker type. So yeah, there's a bunch of different speaker types. It looks like there's 410, there's 412. This is the 812. Let's try a different amps. Instead of the stack crunch, this is the combo crunch. Let's try core metal. So this is the core metal amp sim. That needs more gain. It also has your bass, mids, and treble, just like any amp. And you can even change the mic type. So you can put on, right now we're using a 57. Here's another dynamic mic. Here's the condenser 451. Here's the condenser 87. And here's the setting that's just called flat. This is honestly the first time I'm ever messing with these amp simulators at all, and they sound pretty solid. There's a lot of flexibility, and you can definitely get anything from a clean sound to a pretty distorted sound here. This isn't even as gainy as it'll go. You can add more gain, and you could also add a second effect like distortion. One thing I am interested in trying out is the stereo enhancer effect, because that's going to make it sound a little bit wider, so it'll almost sound like a double-tracked guitar, I think. So let's give that a go. Sounds kind of cool. Pretty sweet. Let's switch over to the Voicelive and we'll take a listen to some of that. All right, so let's take a listen to some of the amp sims here. So this is what they call the clean British amp. Let's take a listen to the Cali clean. And there's a bunch of other clean amps in here, but let's try some of the heavier stuff. And there is a bunch of options to kind of fix that. So like for me, there's a lot of highs on that, so I'd probably take them down. So like I said, I've owned this piece of gear for like quite a bit of time, and honestly, it's pretty old, but I've actually never liked the amp sims. I've never used them because I just never liked what they sounded like. And that's why I always used a Helix, and I went into this because I could get a better guitar tone. And now that I'm doing a first time like back-to-back of the RC600, and I've never actually tried the amp sims before in there, I think that they honestly kind of blow this out of the water. Obviously, I didn't spend much time there like really tweaking, and you could definitely spend a lot more time tweaking than what I just did. But if you're going based off just like out of the box, turn it on and see what it sounds like, the RC600 amp simulation was definitely a lot better. With that being said, the TC Helicon does allow you to put more effects on at the same time. So if you really need a lot of vocal effects or a lot of guitar effects, this might be the way to go. Let me show you what it sounds like when you have vocal and guitar effects on it. Because the RC600 only allows you to put 4 input effects on at a time, where the TC Helicon not only allows you to put multiple voice effects on at the same time. So if I wanted to put on 2 or 3 vocal effects like this, hey, I could do that while also having multiple guitar effects on at the same time. Check, hey, 1, 2. So that is definitely one advantage of this Voicelive 3, is that you can have more effects on at the same time. But if you don't need a lot of effects, or if you use something else separately for effects, that's honestly pretty much the only pro I can think of within the Voicelive 3. All right, so let's recap. Both the Voicelive 3 and the Boss RC600 are very powerful loop stations. You can honestly use either one as just a standalone rig if you're a musician that's looking to loop. You can also use both of them with other musicians if that's what you want to do. If you're looking to run more effects at one time for both your guitar and your voice, and you don't need as many tracks for the looper, the Voicelive 3 is honestly a pretty good bet. It's been pretty solid for me for a few years now, and it'll definitely accomplish that. For me though, I am definitely going to be selling off my Voicelive 3 for sure. In pretty much every single way, the RC600 is just better for my purposes. I don't really need to run more than 4 input effects at the same time because I use a Helix for all my effects, and I really only need the input effects for my voice here and there. And as you just saw in this video, the features of the RC600, including the sound quality and the overall reliability, are just superior to the Voicelive 3. At least in my opinion, they are. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it. It really does help with the YouTube algorithm. And subscribe for weekly punk rock music and punk rock advice. If I missed anything or you have any questions about anything I just discussed, feel free to hit me in the comments. Peace.